Here we go. This is part one of the project showcase from Club Scrap, and this probably is the most substantial project that we'll be making. So I figure let's start with the big stuff, get all the big learning out of the way, and then we can kind of coast into the finish line. As just a thought, you may want to sit back and just watch the process of making this beautiful book, and that will give you a lot more confidence into everything that we're doing has a final purpose, and will probably help you be more successful in the project if you just kind of walk it through in your mind first, and then the follow through with the actual steps. So again, this is the Snap Ring album. If you got the showcase kit, I did take the liberty of printing the instructions and including them in your shipment. I typically do not do that, but since we are in a transition to a new website right now, I didn't want anyone unable to find the link to the instructions. You'll just want to set all of the ribbon and all of the other things aside, because before we can even begin to assemble the book, we're going to follow a very typical process with Club Scrap of trimming and preparing all the papers for us to use. And again, I'll probably work at a pace that maybe might feel a little bit too fast for you, and that's just simply because we're limited on time, and you'll have the ability to press pause and play as much as you want. You just saw me put my accordion pocket file underneath my guillotine style trimmer. I do highly recommend a trimmer like this that has the bypass blade rather than a slider. A lot more powerful and also self-sharpening. There's nothing worse than trying to trim coverweight paper with a dull blade. Since all of these papers will be trimmed, I'm going to put them in the order in which we'll be trimming them. So you'll find kind of a little bit deeper down in the stack, you're going to find 2 sheets of this beautiful handmade paper. We commissioned this paper to be made just for this collection, and it has a beautiful mica sprinkling in it. I always like to pile the paper on my trimmer base. So place that on the trimmer base, hold the paper in the crook of your arm, and then I want you to find just 1 sheet of this beautiful navy plain, and just keep stacking onto this on your trimmer base here. Next, I guess you could find 2 sheets, find another piece of navy, that'll be trimmed next, followed by a piece of this slate. Now the slate, it kind of has this greenish, bluish tone. It's a little bit hard to define that color, but that will be trimmed next. Followed by 2 of the 12 by 12 handmade planes. So again, you'll have a couple of sheets of that handmade paper. So beautiful. Now I want you to find the pottery print. Now that print looks like this. We'll just place that face down, and then followed by another pottery print face down, and then the collage print face down. Now dig back and find the other slate, and then take 1 of the gold. Now this metallic gold is metallic on both sides. It's a text weight. It's a beautiful paper. Then find another navy. It gets easier. Then a gold, and then the other collage print. Followed by, let's see, there should be 2 sheets of cut-aparts. There's one that says your gold, pure gold. Put that face down. And then the other one that has the word ring right here on the left. That'll go face down as well. Now flip everything back over so that on the top now, you'll find these 2 smaller pieces of handmade paper. And if that went a little bit too fast for you, again, like I said, you can rewind this and watch it again. Basically, I was following the instructions, starting with the papers listed on page 1, and then on page 2 as well. I just went down the line and put all the paper in the order that you see it, so that we don't grab the wrong color and everything is set up for our success. Okay, now we're going to be prepping some papers for the cover of our book by doing just some basic trimming here. So take the first sheet and make sure you only have 1 of the 2 you received. Place it vertically in your trimmer, and we'll cut it 7 3/4. Now what I like about this trimmer is that there is a guide every 1/4 inch. So 7, 7 1/4, 7 1/2, 7 3/4. That's easy. Now rotate, and we'll make 2 cuts. The first one at 11 1/2. And then 5 3/4. That gives us the wraps, actually, for our outside cover of our book. Sometimes I like to know where I'm headed. So that's the paper that's going to be used in this spot right here. I'm going to put that in pocket A. Everything going into that first pocket is going to be used on the outside of the album. And if you're not using the accordion pocket file, or if you haven't had a chance to make yours yet, just create a series of 4 piles. Now let's cut the next sheet of this handmade paper vertically at 6 inches. Rotate. And we're going to cut it 9 3/4. And I'm going to give you a measurement you may not be fond of. It's 4 7/8. So to find that, just find 4 3/4 and 5. The 7/8 is halfway between those two numbers, halfway between 4 3/4 and 5. There's a medium-sized mark right there. That's 4 7/8. When you do that, it should create two pieces the same size. Those will be used to cover the inside of your binding. What's nice about having these measurements and doing this trimming is that you are enabling yourself to do it again for future projects. Now you know the dimensions of the paper needed, rather than just having me give them to you all trimmed. You will be able to create this for yourself. Now the next sheet is navy. This one we need to concern ourselves with grain direction because the paper is going to end up being a part of this outside cover, and I want it to work properly. And so I want you to just hold the paper by one of those edges, wiggle it a little bit, and then hold it by an alternating edge, wiggle it again. Which side is most giving or most flexible? I notice this is very, very flexible, and I want to place it in the trimmer going in that direction. So let's cut at 7 3/4. Rotate and cut at 6. Now rotate the 6-inch piece and cut at 6. Easy. This ends up being the inside cover. I'll put that in pocket A with all the other pieces. This ends up being the outside spine cover, also in pocket A. You have a little scrap. You have a number of other scraps I forgot to have you set aside. This longer strip we're going to use later, so let's just trim these at 8 and 4. And we just made some rectangles, and I'm going to put those in pocket D. D as in dog. Now, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, you can just set all these other pieces aside if you want to throw away these tiny little strips. I just keep the larger ones for embellishing the inside of my book. We're already moving on to page 2 of the instructions, and I want to just encourage you here. This trimming process is a little bit overwhelming when you do all of this at once, but it's really nice to be able to put that trimmer away and forget about it for the rest of the entire snap ring workshop. Nice easy cuts here. I'm going to take the blue and the slate, stack them neatly together, and we'll cut at 6. Now rotate and cut at 6 again. Now you just made 4 pieces the same size. These are going to end up being the inside pages of our book. Put them in pocket B. And then grab the other 6 by 12 and repeat. Just trim at 6 inches. Pocket B. Very good. Now, next is the handmade. We have 2 sheets, and they're both going to be trimmed the same way. Now, this is text weight paper, so the grain is not as important. But if you want, you can hold the paper by its edge. It's really going to fall deeply down in one direction and quite deeply in the other. It's not machine-made paper, so it's just a little bit different. You can just see the paper will be folded in the way it wants to go. So we're dipping, if you can find it, we're dipping easily top to bottom. Stack them as neatly as you can, and we'll cut at 10 1/2 and 5 1/4. Now these 4 pieces will get scored. So I'm going to set them aside and not put them in a pocket right now. And we do have these narrow strips we'll set aside as scraps to be used for later. Now the pottery print, we'll just cut in any old way. The grain direction does not matter. We'll cut at 9 1/2 and 5. Rotate and cut at 11 and 5 1/2. So we're cutting these into rectangles. These 2 pieces will go in pocket B. It's nice to have all that paper sorted out instead of having all of these pieces everywhere to make sense of. This next one we'll cut at 11 1/4 and 5 1/2. These are pieces of different sizes, different heights. One's taller than the other. That's by design. Both of them go in pocket D. And we have a couple of scraps. Again, you can save those for later. Just have a nice little scrap pile. Now, grain direction, once again, does not matter. I'm just going to place the other pottery print in the trimmer. Same for this one. Let's see. Maybe I'll go this way with it. It really, I don't know. Maybe this way. I don't know. this way. And which I would consider right side up, I guess, from the design phase. So I have 2 pieces at the same time. Make sure you stabilize on that clear bar for every cut to prevent sliding. And I'm going to cut at 11 and 6. Now rotate the 6 by 12 so they're horizontal and trim at 6. So these are going to make some more inside pages for our book. And all of those are going to go in pocket B. Now we have these other strips. These are currently 5 by 12. And we're going to make a series of cuts here. So just go with me. 11 and a half. 9 and a quarter. 5 and 3/4. And 3 and a half. Stack up all of these oddly sized pieces. There are going to be some narrow ones and some taller ones, okay? There definitely will be a variety of sizes here, 2 sizes, and then there will also be a pair of 1/2-inch scraps. Those can be set aside, and all of these other rectangles are placed in pocket C, and then you do have 2 longer 1-inch strips as well for our scrap pile. Moving right along, we've got some slate. We're going to check the grain direction again, and I want it dipping easily top to bottom. Again, that's because we'll be folding the paper in this direction. If we try to fold it this way, we're fighting the grain, and we're going to have a crumpled, homely little fold. So let's just trim this at 6 inches. Stack up the 2 pieces and set them aside to be scored. And now we have gold. This is machine made. Although it's text weight, you can definitely identify a grain. So I want it dipping easily left to right in this case. And we'll trim this one at 9. Very easy little number there. This large 9-inch piece gets scored. And this will be a scrap. Moving on to the other navy. I'm just clipping away here, trimming away. We'll trim at 10 and 5. So it's 10 and 5. Now stack up the 2 pieces, place them horizontally into the trimmer and cut at 11 and a half and 5 3/4. Place this in pocket D. These are inserts for some of the pockets we'll be making. Okay, gold. This one, we don't even need to trim. I'm just going to set it aside. Okay, how about this collage print? This time we want to check the grain direction. So it dips easily left to right. If I tried it this way, very stiff, nice and dippy. We'll trim at 10 and a half. And then rotate. That's important. And then trim at 11 and a half and 5 3/4. These 2 pieces will be scored, the larger ones, set those aside. And we have a series of scraps. I forgot to pick up the navy ones from earlier, so those are scraps as well. Now there's nothing here. And we are at the last 2 pieces for your trimming. This is the material that will be used to decorate your entire book, as well as the layout that we're going to be making later. Now these cut-aparts can be trimmed scientifically, and we have a way for you to do that. Now, if you look at the corner of this cut apart, and this happens with all of our monthly kits now, you'll see these intersecting guides. They kind of are a light gray color, and that just indicates where we want to make our first cut on this sheet. We're actually going to remove about 1/8 of an inch from the entire perimeter of the cut apart sheet so that we start at the perfect 12 by 12. Now, when you first put this in this Fiskars trimmer, I can just see that gray line at the top. So I'm going to line that up as best I can. And then I got a nice straight line there. Here I'm going to line this up, and then as well at the bottom. I can see the outside edge of my blade perfectly to trim this. And just rotate and repeat the removal of that 1/8 piece on all 4 edges. The reason we've done that is because sometimes on a larger commercial trimmer, there is some slippage, which prevents this from being as accurate as I want it to be. So you did just create these 4 1/8 pieces. I'm going to throw those away. And place this back into the trimmer so that the narrowest strip is on the right. And we'll begin by trimming at 11. You can also visually guess where you're going to trim next by looking at the artwork, and it'll probably fall on the nearest 1/4 inch on the measurement. So this is 10 1/4, 9 1/2, 8, and 5. Now I'm going to rotate this piece, and whenever I rotate, I always make sure that the narrowest portion that's being removed is on the right. And we'll cut at 10 and 8. Since all of my pockets are in use for this, I think I might just put everything I trim into pocket D, kind of behind everything I have going on there, just so it doesn't get misplaced. Or if you'd like, you can just set it in the project bag, wherever wherever it's most convenient that you won't lose anything. Every day is a fresh start should be on your right, and then we'll cut at 10, 8, 6, and 4. All right, I'm going to gather all those up and just put them in that back pocket so they're safe. And then we do have these narrow strips. When I made the accordion pocket file, I used 12-inch paper. I knew that would be the easiest. So that means my accordion pocket file is only 12 inches wide. So when you put things in the pocket that are 12 inches wide, just do so at an angle so they stick out the right side and you can still see all the numbers on the left. Let's do that one more time with this last sheet. So again, we'll begin by looking at the corner and just trimming off that first little 1/8 inch edge. Rotate and repeat until the entire perimeter has been trimmed up. Okay, now I'm going to trim my narrow strips first. So the idea is that if you have the majority of your paper on the trimmer base lined up here, you're going to have the straightest cuts. So if you've ever suffered like crooked cuts, it might be because half your paper's not aligned with something at a 90-degree angle with your blade. All right, let's trim this at 11, and then 9 1/2, 7 1/2, 6 3/4, and 4 1/4. Now I know I'm probably going too fast for some of you, and again, the idea being soak all this up, and I'll try to share information with you that even if you don't have this project kit, you'll still learn a lot tonight. All right, this is trimmed at 6 1/4. And now we have these little things that can be fussy cut, I would call it, and we'll just put those in our little storage area here. This next strip I think is 8 1/2. I have spent so much time writing instructions for this project, I practically have them memorized. And then here we have a bunch more narrow strips. I really like these for anchoring and, just something to put your photos on. But all those still in the back of pocket D. Beautiful. That's the trimming for this entire project. Now you never have to look at this guy again until we make our note cards. I'm going to carefully support my accordion pocket file, which is being held up by my trimmer, and swap out my score pal. Now we've gone ahead and set aside all these pieces to be scored, so I'm basically just going to be looking back in the instructions for the things that need to be scored and kind of walk you through that. Now this first piece was trimmed in step 12, and this is a 10 1/2 by 5 3/4 inch piece. It's printed. I'm going to put it plain side up in my score pal, and we'll score it in half at 5 1/4. I'll repeat that for the other pottery print, just plain side up at 5 1/4. Stack them together. These both end up in pocket B. B as in boy. All right, now we have this beautiful gold text weight paper. Now, remember, if you're scoring cover weight and all of a sudden you're scoring on text weight, you really need to lighten up, okay? If you score too heavily, especially when you're scoring against the grain, it will rip the paper. So I'm scoring at 6 and just a little bit more gently than if I was using cover weight paper. So 6 inches in each direction, and I can set that piece aside again. Now this gold piece that we trimmed earlier, this one is 9 by 12. We're going to score at 6. And then we're going to score horizontally at 6. Easy enough so far. Set this aside again for some treatment. And then we have the slate. These are scored horizontally at 6 and 11.5. So repeat that for the next one. Score at 6 and 11.5. Now we have 4 sheets of this beautiful handmade paper. Again, this is like a text weight, so be gentle. Of course, you want to be able to see the score line. The first one's at 3 3/4, and then 9.5. 3 3/4, 9.5. So the same is true for all of them. In fact, I'm going to take the next 2 pieces, score at 3 3/4, with a little bit more pressure, and 9.5. Make sure that transferred okay. Yes, I have some nice score lines on all of them. So you can do text weight 2 at a time. All 4 of these little handmade guys are going to go in pocket C. Nice. And that is everything I have to score. So guess what? We get to make our book right now. We're going to start our book, and I will finish up some of the preparation for these unique pages when we get to that spot in the process. So I'm turning to page 3 of the instructions. There is a section called Album Assembly, and then right away it says Pocket A. That means everything we put in that pocket is needed to complete this step, and all the other stuff will be out of the way from our project. So the first thing we need to do is take the bookboard spine piece that should be in your kit. This is 1/8 of an inch thick. It's a nice sturdy surface. It's wonderful, professional looking for our purposes. And I'm going to grab this two-ring binder mechanism. Now what I'm going to do is basically center this onto the bookboard as best as I can. And if you happen to pick up the toolkit or already have a Club Scrap grid ruler, you could also just make sure that this is centered, officially centered, by using the 0 center on the ruler. So as promised, here are some tips that you can just use in your general crafting. This is going to be a measurement of 3 1/8 inch from the bottom and top edges, and that puts me at 0. So then I can look at the edge of my binder ring here and make sure I'm just a little shy at 2.5 inches on each side. Now I feel pretty good about the fact that I'm centered from top to bottom on this, and I'm going to mark the location of those 2 holes at the top and bottom of this with my pencil. You can set the binder rings aside, and we're going to need to puncture through this using something that I hope that you have. When initially listing the materials needed for this class, I apologize. I forgot to mention that you would need some sort of a Crop-a-dile or something to get through this material. Now, if you don't have any of this, you can use even the tip of a craft knife if you're very, very careful. But I'm just going to put a small hole into that marked area on each side. We're only just putting a brad through it, so if you even just use a knife to bore out a hole, not everyone has a Crop-a-dile that can get through something like this, but I think it's a pretty basic tool that most of you have. So again, if you don't have a Crop-a-dile on the small hole to just punch through, use a piercing tool, use a craft knife, just kind of work your way through to create a hole so that later we're going to be able to install this with the brads I've included. Now from pocket A, we have these handmade papers and then the navy colored papers. So the navy will cover the spine and then the handmade will cover the other. So I want you to find the largest piece of navy blue from the pocket. This is 6 by 7 3/4, and I'm going to place it vertically on my work surface. Next, I want to use my grid ruler to measure 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of this piece of paper. Now, when I teach classes, normally what I see people do is they take their grid ruler and hold it 3/4 of an inch up and then mark it over here, and then they connect the 2 lines that they made. You can skip that with this particular ruler because it already has a grid that it tells me where 3/4 of an inch is. Now, if I rest the paper against the ruler, I'm at 0. Every solid line on the ruler represents 1/4 of an inch. So that's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. As long as the edge of my paper is lined up on that 3/4 inch line, I can just draw and instantly it's 3/4. Now, if you've never done this before, I recommend taking the ruler and just double checking that you actually are at 3/4. If there's going to be an error, I don't want you to make it here. Okay, then I want you to make a mark 2 1/4 inches from the left edge. So again, if we're here, we're at 0. There are increasingly more bold lines on this ruler. So this first really bold line is an inch, or 4/4 together is an inch. So you can count up 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an inch. This next really bold line is 2 inches, and we need it to be 2 1/4. So I'm just going to go one more solid line in. That puts me at 2 1/4. I'll draw my next line. I know it took a long time to explain how to measure on these silly measurements, but learning this is going to make you really efficient with your crafting. So if I'm verifying now. Here's 1, 2, 2 1/4. I have verified I'm 2 1/4 inches from the left edge. And I've created these intersecting points. Enter my favorite thing, bookbinding glue. And we're going to be using this throughout all of our projects in different capacities. I like this wet bookbinding glue because I can control my dry time by how much glue I use, and it can be very neat and tidy. A lot of things I see people do who've never made a book like this before is put their item that they're going to put glue on their work surface, apply the glue, and then brush it. But glue gets everywhere, so I'm going to teach you some ways to control the amount of glue we use and keep the mess to a minimum. Hold the spine piece that you've punched by the side, and I want you to take the glue and just dispense some of it onto the spine. Don't go crazy. Then take your foam brush, and I don't want you to paint it like this is painting. I want you to sweep it across the spine in long motions, making sure you get every edge. So notice the shine that I have here. I see I'm missing a little bit on this edge. I really want a thorough coat, but I don't want it white and opaque. I want it to be shiny like this and to still be able to see the color of the board. Now I'm going to take this piece and position the lower left corner of the vertical board into those intersecting pencil lines that I made. If you really want to just be a nice double check, just add your ruler to the paper and make sure that the spine is sitting right next to it. So these intersecting guides helped you center this quite accurately onto the paper. Now flip it over and just give it a little burnish. Your fingertips are just great burnishing tools. They're built in. You take them everywhere. And what's nice too is that I've kept the excess glue away from my fingers, away from my work surface, so I don't have to worry about getting this glue on this beautiful navy paper. Next, what we need to do while we can is just simply transfer the location of those two holes through to the other side of the cover so we don't lose them. If you want to just kind of burrow through there a little bit just so we maintain the location, you can use a tip of a scissors and a bone folder, just whatever you have on hand to transfer that location of the hole. Next we have these bookboard covers. They need to be arranged so they're the same height as the spine. But look at that, they're not the same. If they're not, you need to rotate them. Always just make sure you're working with the same height of the spine because these are not squares, they're rectangles. They need to be in a horizontal orientation. For now, I'm going to set aside my spine piece and take my ruler, and I want to mark 2 inches from this short edge of each of these pieces. So just solid line is 1 inch. The second solid line, I'm at 2 inches. Boom, nice and level and straight. And then I can repeat that for the other piece. You could do those at the same time if you wanted. Just 2 inches from the edge is all you have to do. This, to me, is one of the best ways to install a book cover onto a spine cover. So here we have this area that we marked that was 2 inches. And if you are, again, new to the measuring, you could just grab your grid ruler and double check. Yes, verify you are 2 inches from there. And I want you to take some bookbinding glue and just add a little bit to that 2-inch area only. Then take the glue brush and just pick up some of that glue that you've dispensed and rub it like that chisel tip of a foam brush along the guide that you made with your pencil. Then sweep the rest of the glue onto that entire surface in a nice, neat motion. Make sure the edges are thoroughly covered there. I get that nice shine, but I can still see the color of the board kind of underneath. You gotta have enough, but not too much. I know that's a high calling. Here's what we're gonna do. I've got my little bookboard spine ready to go. I'm going to place this here, and I want 1/4 inch between the spine and my cover. That's so that the book can open and close easily. So by placing the ruler horizontally here, I can go from one solid line on my ruler to the next one and then drop it in place. I know I'm level. The ruler is helping me, so is this guideline. Now, what about on the other side? What's happening? Let's take a look and flip this over. Oh my goodness, it's perfect. It's literally lined up right on the line that I glued to. That just makes me really happy. If it's not, you see a little bit of pencil mark, you just can carefully, wipe away the adhesive and make sure you try not to get any on here. I'm going to repeat that with the other cover. So apply the glue. Remember to pick up some of the excess with the chisel tip and go right along the edge of the pencil line. And then just sweep to the edge. Also note that I'm holding this off of my work surface. That way I don't get glue all over my work surface and mess it up on my book. Let me just also say that if you do happen to not make a perfect book, don't lose heart. I've made many, many books, and many of them have ended up in the circular file. Just be gracious and kind to yourself in this process as you're learning it. Learning it is one thing and perfecting it is another, and it just takes time. It took time for me, and if this is your first book, it'll take time for you, and that's okay. Maybe you'll be wonderfully surprised and it will be absolutely flawless. Oh, here we go. You can see exactly what happened. Just a little bit over the edge. No big deal. I just wiped that away. So this is attached. Our covers are starting to look more like they're going to become a book, and the book has functionality. Yay! Okay, so now from pocket A, I have these two pieces that are larger. They should be the same height as the book spine cover. So to complete this, you might have some glue in your brush already, but it looks like I'm getting a little dry. The board is very thirsty, and so I'll add some. Now, same kind of approach here. You want to begin by picking up some of the glue and running it along the edge of this spine. And many, many books are made this way. I love the contrast between the spine itself and the other cover paper. Notice I'm holding this off of my work surface while I work, and that way no glue is landing on my work surface. Just try to stay neat and clean, making long sweeping motions, not painting motions. And why do I say that? Well, painting takes so much longer than sweeping, and by the time I get done painting, the paint's going to be dry. So here I have my beautiful piece of handmade paper. The height is the same. I'm going to land this paper on the spine cover, and I'm going to drag it until it clicks down into the glue that we've added to the cover. And then burnish. Especially with this handmade paper, if you use too much glue, you might have a lot of bubbles or little wrinkles that occur. So I'm just making sure I burnish well to cover that side. I'm going to turn this around and start the whole process again. So I'll apply the glue and spread it thinly. And once again, I'll come back and slide this in. Burnish. I can see some aging developing over here on this side. It's just probably using a little bit too much glue. I think if you can avoid using too much, just use as little as possible. I'm going to try to migrate these shrivelly looking wrinkles to the outside, get rid of those air bubbles, and do the same thing. It's happening on this side just a little bit. Just smooth it out carefully. And because it's handmade paper, it should cooperate with you really well. It didn't happen to me on my second sample of this. I've made several versions because I used substantially less glue. So that's my hindsight 2020 tip for you, is just use as little glue as possible so that you avoid that. Now, when this dries, that should completely, any wrinkles should completely disappear, and you still have the benefit of that gorgeous handmade paper on your cover. I'm going to start out with the spine flaps. You can see these flaps extending. I'm going to turn up that paper and wrap it around the spine, and if you want, you can use a bone folder. The goal here is to make sure that you have these nice prepared creases in the paper before we glue this cover weight paper onto the book. So I'm going up basically making two 90-degree turns and around, up and around. So at this point, you have quite a bit of glue in your brush. So I encourage you to try to do this stuff without adding glue. See that? I have quite a bit there. So I'm going to just apply glue, making sure you get some on the top of the board. Notice I'm holding this off of my work surface. You'll get tired of hearing me say it, but I don't think I can say it enough. Keeping that off the work surface is critical. Now, set this back down. I can now wrap the softened paper, and it will get nice and soft from the glue. And look at that. No excess oozing out. And look at that beautiful bond that I have immediately with the board. That's my book binding glue for you. So if you got the toolkit, you got the book binding glue in a 2-ounce bottle, it will go a long way. You'll be able to make a lot of projects with just one little 2-ounce bottle. And I do have it in an 8-ounce as well. We have a harder time shipping the glue. It should not freeze. So we are in Wisconsin, and you may not be able to get it as easily this time of year. It's been warm, so we've been very lucky. Okay, so wrap, no oozing happening, and almost an instantaneous bond. Now before we glue down our flaps, we need to miter these corners, and I'm going to use the scissors just to trim away at a 45-degree angle some, but not all, of the paper that extends beyond the tip of this corner. I've got a pretty generous amount of paper here. Let's just take a little measurement. I got a 1/4 of an inch there. It's a lot of paper. Better to have too much than not enough in this case, all right? You have to have at least enough paper so that the height of the paper that you've left behind is at least the height of the board itself. The board is 1/8 of an inch thick, so I could maybe get away with just a little bit less, but I know how to deal with more. I can't deal with less. One little hot tip for you is that the ruler is 1/8 of an inch thick, so if I put the ruler vertically against the corner, kind of at a 45-degree angle, I can draw a line on the outside of the ruler. Oops. And then I can even cut on the outside, just outside of that line. You won't need to do this for every corner. You'll just kind of get the hang of it, okay? And you'll do that on all 4 corners. So I'll just go ahead and do that on this corner and the other one. Okay, so now what we're going to do is apply more glue to this flap that still is on the long edge. And please forgive me if I haven't been following the steps of the instructions one by one. I'm kind of just doing what I know, and I think that I was going to miter the corners first before I even glue down the spine. So my apologies if I'm confusing you with my out-of-order steps. I'm just following my heart. And then I'm going to do the other side. This is important. Do not do the short flap on the end until the end. Okay, so wrapping that around, burnishing. Oh, this handmade paper just wraps so nice. And I'll repeat that on the other end. You want to make sure that paper bonds also well with the edge. Nice, beautiful edges so far. Okay. Now, you have excess paper here, and that's what we want because we don't want a naked corner. So what we're going to do is just tuck in this paper. And I always like to say, remember when you wrap gifts, it's gift wrapping season right now, and you wrap around the box and you have to tuck in the sides. Imagine you're wrapping the tiniest, shortest box ever. So the tuck right here, bringing those in, is the critical step to the most professional cover you'll ever see. Do you see that? See how nice that corner looks? Just like a professionally made book. There you have it. That's my tip for you. Now, when you start running out of glue in the tip of your brush, do not ever apply glue to the corner of anything. Do it in the seam, in the center of your remaining flap. I am still holding this off my work surface and supporting this flap from behind with my fingers. And then I am starting here and pulling outward. Again, I'm not painting. I'm just brushing it to the edges. And again, if you don't have glue there, it will not stick. So it has to be a pretty thorough application. Not a heavy one, but it just has to cover everything. And I'm just going to smooth this out with my bone folder and then attach the final flap. But first, do your little tuck and your tuck on both sides. You can do the test. Doesn't that look nice? Oh, bookmaking makes me really happy. It's been a long time since I've been able to teach a book making class. I kind of know some of the hang-ups, you know, with first timers. And so just, again, please be patient with yourself. I know I can tend to make this look easy, and the ease is what came with a lot of practice. So just be mindful of that and be patient with yourself. Take your time with it. And remember, it's a prototype. When I make a project the first time, I call it a prototype. When I make it a second time, it's then a sample, and then each one thereafter gets better and better. Look at my beautiful book cover. Ha ha ha! Okay, I hope you're proud of yourself. You've done a great job so far. Now we have the inside spine cover to attach. It is a square piece of paper. But remember, we cut this navy way back with a grain direction. So we need to bend the paper to figure out which way the paper bends most easily. Now this fights me. It just wants to bend in this direction, which is why that's how we want to attach it to our spine, okay? Making sure it goes the right way. The paper will soften when you apply the glue to it, but working with the grain is going to be a lot better. Now I am holding this in the palm of my hand because the paper is cover weight. I can kind of hold it like in a U shape and bring the glue to the outside edges in long sweeping motions. Again, I often see students do this, and it takes a long time, and then the glue starts to dry, and then it's a problem. I'm also keeping it, you know, by holding it in the palm of my hand on a curve like this, I'm keeping it off of my work surface to avoid getting glue where I do not want it. So this was the bendy way. I will center this from top to bottom and burnish. Now, while this glue is still wet, what I want you to do is gently use the pad of your finger to pave the way for this to just indent down into the gutter between the spine and the cover. Just an indentation with the pad of your finger. Lovely, right? Now I can maybe just gently, while it's still wet, and then my book is going to open and close exactly the way it should. And provided you have glue all the way to the outer perimeter of that spine cover, nothing should pop up here. If it does, just kind of pop it back down. Oh, it's just looking so good. I hope you agree. Okay, now, you know, due to this handmade, you know, you can just pick a side. Some of them look exactly the same on both sides, some don't. These would cover these vacant areas here of the book board. Now this might be the time where you'd want to grab a piece of scrap paper. I know I will. I have some scraps here. I'm going to place this really lightweight paper on my scrap paper to protect my work surface. It's really difficult to hold this up with my palm of my hand, so I need to just have a surface so I can get all the way to those outer edges. The paper will tend to curl. And the scrap paper just really helps alleviate any challenges because it just, as you can see, is more challenging. So I'm going to try to get comfortable here. This is probably the most challenging step, to be honest. And I'm going to start on this end, try to line this up with the spine cover and with that seam. And then go back toward this edge and burnish. Just my fingertips are doing an adequate job. Beautiful. Okay, now I'll rotate and find a new area of my scrap paper. Place this on, apply a little glue, and fan that glue to all the outside edges. I could kind of tell I'd missed a little bit of a spot on my last cover. I'm not going to let that happen again. And it's not a lot, please. Don't overglue this or it will really wrinkle on you. Okay, line that up. The seam. It's hard with the camera right overhead. Like, you can just get in there and as close as you want and get your reading glasses going, whatever you need to be able to see. Make sure you have good lighting. And there is my beautiful cover. Yay! Now I'm gonna just take my awl Do this with all your all. Transfer. And maybe with the tip of my bone folder, just kind of, you could use a pencil tip. Just make sure that you have the holes revealed. I have not looked at my instructions for a really long time, so I hope I didn't miss anything critical. All right, looks like we did like 13 steps with no instruction assistance. So I think mostly to the order I dreamed about. Now is the time we can add this binding mechanism. And I have a couple of different tips for you. Number one, you have a bunch of glue in the tip of your brush. And just to ensure that we have good stability, I'm just going to have you tap. I'm primarily just thinking where the hole is, but there are some other contact points that we can get here on this binding, just for some extra security. Now that isn't going to touch the spine at all. That's okay. I just want a little added security. And then I'm going to place this over the holes that I have transferred twice now to my book. Then I'm going to take my brad, and if you already loaded your needle tip applicator with bookbinding glue, good on ya. Hopefully it means you made your accordion pocket file. If you haven't, if you got the toolkit and you have this, I like to just put a little bit of bookbinding glue into the head of the brad and also into the circle or the opening where I'm going to be placing this brad. Again, it's just a tiny amount of insurance that this will stay put, and I've had really good luck with doing these two things. I'm inserting this brad from the back or from the outside of the book to the inside. And I'm also doing it so the prongs open from left to right with respect to the book. And then, if you want, you can take the tip of your bone folder and kind of guide those prongs so that they bend around that mechanism just ever so slightly. Just shape that a little bit, and then it gives it a nice look. Now rotate and then repeat the whole process with the other brad, which I hope you haven't lost. I think Deb packed the brads with the in a bag or something maybe. So remember, in the head of the brad and also in the hole. I'm entering so that the attractive part of the brad is on the outside of the project. The prongs will open left to right. You now have a binder. Isn't that lovely? Okay, I have some scraps. I gotta clean up my area a little bit. Why don't you do the same? Okay, if you just turn to page 5 for a moment, you're going to be seeing a template that I added there. And I was conscientious to make sure the template was on a page that didn't have any text on the back of it. And if you want, you can go ahead and just trim this page punching template right from your sheet of paper, or you can bring the paper to the sheet. I'm just going to do it this way so we don't have to worry about messing with all these instructions. I'm going to need them anyway. And I'll just cut this out roughly here. You have a series of things in pocket B. So take everything out of pocket B. When you do, you're going to find a stack of 6x6 pages. You'll find 2 smaller pages as well as 2 larger ones that are printed. So these 6x6 pages, if you want, you can page through them and pick an orientation. Like if you want a certain thing to be on the top, you're going to want to do that for those 4 prints. In fact, let's just do that. And now in my mind, this is my left edge. So I'm going to take the edge of my template and line it up with the edge of my pages. And what this did is just saved you the step of having to measure. And you can choose either the small or the large hole of any kind of a hole punch or Crop-a-dile, whatever you're using. Now, if you are using just a standard 3-hole punch or like 1/4 inch punch, you will probably need to do fewer sheets at a time. So that was 4. I wonder if I can do all of 8 of these plain. So the navy and the slate, those don't really matter so much as far as orientation. And I did all 8 of these if you have good hand strength. Otherwise, I recommend maybe 4 at a time. Okay, so now I have all these pages ready to go. I'm going to keep my template handy. You can either use these pre-punched pages as a template or just keep using the original. It's up to you. Okay, now we have the scored page. Notice I had you score this on the plain side. That creates a bump on the printed side because I'm going to put the bump actually on the inside of this fold. And just make a nice crease. Repeat that for the other one. And then these other prints that you trimmed should fit or nest perfectly onto the outside front. So just make sure you know what you want to be on the top. Now I think I want it to be this way. So I'm going to nest this onto here. And for that, I'll just use my ATG gun. This is the fastest adhesive gun in the West. And just check again my orientation. So this is the front. And I can center this. So now I have pretty, and then when I open it, I have pretty. And then repeat for the second one. Get your orientation this way, and nest this onto the top. Now, since these are printed, I'm going to find, I think I'm going to do slate, and it doesn't really matter what color you choose, but notice how I have designed this so that it nests perfectly onto one of your trimmed pages. And just as a repeat, I know that at the beginning we always do all of this trimming and it's like, you know, it's a lot. I understand that, but it's so much fun when you get to this part and you just get to do this assembly, and it's so fast and easy. It's kind of like just rolling downhill, picking up steam, saving time. I enjoy this part of the process so much more if I don't have to keep stopping this creative part and, you know, or the assembly part. So here I have all of these wonderful pages and two of them like with the bonus fold out. Okay, so at this point I can choose, like if I want to start with a navy, and then maybe I'll do a fold out and then a slate. I'm just playing this by ear. And then how about a pottery print? A navy, a fold out, a pottery, I'll do a pottery print, a slate, a print, a slate, a print, a navy. I don't know. That sounds good. I'm just guessing. Choose a front, and that can always change if you want. Open your snap rings and go ahead and install all of these prepared pages onto the rings. So we're already forming the book. We have got our cover page. When you open it, you got something exciting to do. And, oh, maybe I'll just switch this out because I got two slates in a row. That's no problem. I can put it here. Just page through yourself. Make sure you like what you're seeing. Beautiful. I like this. So here we've got to start. We've already got a nice book with some 6x6 pages inside. And if you have paper that matches, you can go ahead and trim them to 6x6, use the template to punch some more and insert some more pages. But we have a few more special pages we're going to be making. So let's go into pocket C now and take everything out of pocket C. And we're also turning to page 5 of our instructions. We have these handmade sheets, 4 of them, and you'll notice each has 2 score lines. Bury the bump of the score that you made, making sure your paper is as level as possible, like lined up on the edges when you do make your folds. And then we have all these other odd-shaped pieces. So you can go ahead and fold in on all of your pages. And what I want you to do is when you finish each one, place it so that the wide flap is on the top and on top, and then the skinnier flap is on the bottom. So now I have this series of printed rectangles, and what's cool about them is that the larger rectangles that we created fit on the tops of these flaps, and the smaller rectangles we created will nest perfectly onto the bottom of these flaps. You'll notice that it even creates the look of the entire print because of the way we trim them. So all you need to do at this point is just apply some adhesive to the print, add it to the top flap, and you should be able to center that perfectly onto the handmade paper. Then open, and then you'll be able to apply the print to the bottom flap so that when it's closed, it looks kind of like this. Very nice. Repeat that for all 4 of these folio inserts. Now, as I'm working here with the prints, I've decided I'm going to choose to add the narrow flap on the top of this one because I think there's more design to look at. This one I think I'm going to do this way, just keep that prominent. It's so beautiful. And these are all ready to install, so just pick your page in your book. So if I open, I got something exciting going on here. Nothing happening in this department, so I'm going to go ahead and install this right onto that blue, that navy page. I'm adding adhesive on all 4 sides just because it's part of the foundation of the book and I want to make sure it's stable. Something exciting happening there. Nothing happening here, so maybe I'll add another one of these. And just continue to add these to any barren looking areas of your book. It's really starting to get beautiful. We've got a couple more things that we can do. Now find the 12 by 12 gold plane that has been scored at 6 inches in either direction. And we are going to follow sort of carefully this illustration that we have right in your instructions on page 5. With my scissors, I'm going to make a cut right along the score line. I have the bumps of the score line facing up, and I think it's just a little bit easier to see the lines that way. And you could use a craft knife and cutting mat and ruler to do that as well. Now with that slit in place, I'm going to next make a diagonal fold that is 4 inches from each corner. Now I'm using a cutting mat by Club Scrap that has a grid mark, and most cutting mats do have inch marks on the mat. I'm not sure how often you use them, but if I just count 1, 2, 3, 4, I know right where my ruler line needs to start. I can do the same from the other edge, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I just place my ruler at those 2 numbers, that 2 over here and the 8 over here, now I have this angle, 4 inches and 4 inches. Just simply lift up the corner of the paper, get rid of the ruler, and just solidify that angular fold. Wasn't that easy? I didn't have to measure or mark anything really. I just used my cutting mat to help me find those measurements. Okay, we can also, this cutting mat has a 1 to 12 edge, and it also has a 0 edge going out from the center. So if you just now continue to maintain the positioning of your piece, this is the folded corner, and this is the cut edge here. If I bring this up to the right, I'm going to make another angled fold, this time 3 inches from each corner. And because I have my cutting mat positioned that way, here's my 3 and my 3. So I can line that up. I don't even need to mark anything. And I can lift up that corner of the triangular shape. I'm not sure if you've ever used a cutting mat this way, but I'm using it like this more and more. And just finish the crease. Beautiful. Okay, now again, continuing to follow these little steps on here. We've done step 1, which is this fold, step 2. Now step 3 says to make this upper left quadrant go to the right. So just simply line that up. And at this point, you could take some adhesive or just a little bit of bookbinding glue and run it right on the edge, a very light dose of this flap so that the side of the pocket is sealed. Now you've made this really beautiful pocket here. Now the next step is to bring the lower right quadrant up. Okay, that takes this with it, of course. And line everything up nicely here. Look, a second pocket has been made. I absolutely love this, and you can do this with an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper as well to make a greeting card. Well, you can do it with any size paper, right? This works really well with a square for our little book for sure. So I adapted this from a card structure that I've done in a card kit before. I've just sealed that side of the pocket. Now, this is the remaining quadrant that was in the lower left corner. All we do is just bring that around to the back swing it, and now we have a 2-pocket folio that opens to another page from just one sheet of 12 by 12 paper. Isn't that cool? We'll set this pocket aside, and now I'm going to bring in that 9 by 12 gold piece that we've scored. Place it in front of you so that score line is closest to you, the horizontal line, and the bumps of the scores are facing up. You can take scissors at this point, and I'm going to make a small dart that removes this score line. So at a very slight angle, I'm just freestyling here. I'll head up to the intersecting point of those horizontal and vertical lines. I'm going to come in from the other side as well to finish off my dart. So it's like a real skinny little V. That's essentially removing the score line. Now I could have just made another one of these, but I just wanted to show you just different ways you can create pockets, and this is just another fun one. Okay, now what I want to do is place my ruler 1 inch below the edge of the ruler, 1 inch down from this horizontal score line. Once I cover the line with my ruler, it gets kind of hard to see, so I'm just using the grid of my cutting mat to help me ensure that I'm level and at the right spot. So my 1 inch, my score line is here, and my ruler is 1 inch below that line. Now take this little corner where you removed the dart and bring the edge of the paper there up against the ruler's edge. Do the same on the other side. I have a really fun project that features this. You make a little folio out of a manila file folder. It's really, really neat. So now I have these 2 little triangles. Next, bring up the flap that we created on that, fold on that score line. You can see these pretty pockets being formed. Now if you just unfold them for a moment, and a very small amount of glue right on the seam so that the outside edge, what will become the outside edge of this pocket, can be sealed. I'm not really worried about these longer edges because here's what will happen. Let's fold so that the pockets are on the outside. Line everything up nicely and set this aside. Now we'll bring in the slate papers that we scored. I'll place one of them horizontally with the bumps of the score facing up and that narrow score line on my right. What I want to do is make a cut line from the right edge of this paper 2 inches up from the bottom. So 1, 2. I want a cut line here. This is a dress rehearsal for our note card carrier. Now I want to make that line angle up to 1 inch from the center score line. So do you see how I'm using my cutting mat to find these numbers? It just makes this job super easy. So here's my 2 inch mark. I can take my scissors, or I could have taken a ruler and craft knife, and I'm just going to trim right toward that fold. Now with my ruler and a craft knife, I'll use my non-dominant hand as I work with my ruler and my pen knife. Hold the pen knife close to the blade. Bring the knife toward you when you make your cut, and there that goes away. So again, it's 1 inch from the score here, going down to 2 inches above this bottom edge here. Okay, so now we have these score lines. I'm just going to go ahead and bury the bumps of those scores. Bring that in. Now that makes this little tab. Take your bookbinding glue, add some glue to the front of the tab, and then I'm going to add a tiny amount right on the bottom edge. That bookbinding glue comes in really handy, doesn't it? And then just close this onto itself. Now this was designed to leave this area free and clear so that you can simply punch your holes and use this as a pocket. Let's do this a second time with the other slate piece. Bumps are up, skinny bump is on the right. I'm lining it up on the grid of my cutting mat. Count 2 inches up from the edge, 1 inch to the right of the spine, of the center score rather. If you want, you can just go ahead and cut to that score line. Make sure you're comfortable when you're using your craft knife. A lot of people struggle with using a craft knife. It just takes a lot of practice, firm pressure, and always make sure you're working with a sharp blade. Again, fold over, bury those bumps, and add your glue. So these are the 4 pocket pages that we designed. There are 3 different structures here, and I hope that doing these inspires you to attempt these types of folds in other projects. That's the whole idea. Not only learn how to make this one particular book, but learn how to make more just like it. So at this point I can take, let's see, the most friendly page template I have here. Make sure you line it up against the edge of your page itself. I'll grab my punch and then transfer those holes to my pockets. I just want to remind you, so on these I punched obviously so that it angles this way. Here the angle's on the outside, so it's a little bit different. And then here these angles are also on the outside, but then we can open this one. At this point, you do have some things in the 4th pocket that can insert into the pockets we just made. So how about a blue goes in here? Now I did trim this to only 5 3/4 inches high. If you added too much glue down at the bottom seam, you might not be able to fit this in all the way. If that's the case, just trim a little bit off. I tried to maximize the paper size to fit here. I must have had a little bit of a wider glue line. You see how close it comes to the top edge? Then we have 2 more, one for this one, front and back. Nice. And then remember the 2 that I had that are different heights. The tall one goes in the back pocket, and the slightly shorter one goes in front of that, and that way you have a nice double reveal here. So all of the math required to finish these pages was done in those early stages when we made all those trims of all those papers. I had a plan for each one, and now that plan has come to fruition. So how about if I install this pretty pocket page here, and then how about another, let's see, we have to find homes for our slate pockets, and I like to have just a lot of color variety when I can. Oh, here's another good place for a gold. And then just keep adding them wherever you want. Everything's been installed. The only thing left to do now at this point is to take all of the rest of the pieces in your pockets, the cut aparts, everything, and incorporate them into your finished book. Let's do a really quick tour of my decorated version. Okay, so here we have the beautiful finished book with some decor on the front. I took one of the cut aparts and adapted it, keeping in mind that all of those page kit cut aparts that you have were designed for 12 by 12 layout, so they'll have to be adapted. And I nested another cut apart onto one of the gold scraps that will be in your scrap pile. When you open up to the front, again, adapted this cut apart to fit, and then just added a gorgeous piece of ribbon. By the way, the ribbon that we've included in this project kit is plentiful. It's designed to be used as you wish. There's no specific reason or spot to use any particular ribbon. You can use it as you wish. Now see what I did here? I happen to have a little tab-shaped punch. I think mine is by We Are Memory Keepers, and I just punched a tab and attached it here so that a person will know that that needs to be flipped up and to be enjoyed. Here's that double pocket. Here's one of those mats that we trimmed early on, the very first sheet of navy. We created some mats. Look at that. Isn't that neat? This is just made from nested scraps and a fussy cut heart from the cut aparts. Inhale, exhale. Oh, I'm so fond of how this turned out. I think I'm going to be using this particular book, made another tab there, to showcase some pictures from a European vacation I took with my husband and another couple. I want to make a book for them so they can remember their trip in a special way, but yet not have this huge album to put on their bookshelf. Just some highlights from our trip, and I think that's going to be beautiful. Look how neat this turned out. Your toolkit also included some foam adhesive circles, and I used those to pop this fussy cut pottery image along with this beautiful quote. Look at how pretty that is. You could literally use this for anything from a wedding or even just a cancer survivor, someone who's really been through a lot. I think something like this would be great. Like, let's just use it for anything from 2020. I think it'll be a perfect fit. So there you have the Snap Ring album. I really hope you enjoyed this project, but even more than that, that you learned skills that you can use again and again. Exercise these skills and you'll simply get better and better.